Okay, so maybe we can start. So welcome to this webinar. This is the fifth in the series, and the webinar is on unlocking the GCC 2.0 projects portal for project owners and the VVBs. So as you know, 2 days back on 13th, we had the webinar focusing on the projects portal on registration. So today, the focus will be on issuance. We'll start with issuance, and then we'll also try to take up a bit on the PRC, the post-registration changes, and how to use this. So before I begin, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Amit Tusu, and I'm Senior Director at Global Carbon Council, and will be moderating this session today. With me is my colleague Shubindu Biswas, is Director at Global Carbon Council, and would also be participating in this and presenting the demo. As you know, the purpose is for project owners and for verifiers to get used to how the interface looks like and how to use this interface on the projects portal. Yeah, I think we had the recordings of the previous registration session. So that was made available to all of you, but also the previous webinars that are there. We also have the YouTube channel with the Global Carbon Council. Many of the recordings are also available there in case you want to subscribe to it so that you don't miss it. Okay, so for the agenda today, I think it's, as I said, it's very clear. I will be focusing on the issuance and the PRC. For those of you that have joined this for the first time, GCC 2.0 is a single window new framework for a regulatory framework for the GCC. It will include everything related to CORSIA, first phase, pilot phase, Article 6.2, ICVCM, and AREC. We have published a number of regulatory documents, including PS, validation reports, and PRC templates. So everything is available for you to use. Two documents are still remaining, the transition plan and fee schedule. We're going to upload them in next week, probably, or in the next 10 days. So let me begin with the ground rules first. If there at the end of this session, we'll have the Q&A for some time, and also you have the chat box. You can raise electronic hand or put your questions directly in the chat box. We'll try to respond to our responses itself, and towards the end of the session, we will definitely provide opportunity for some questions. I would request you to mute your microphones if you have not done so. The presentation videos will be shared with you. May I first, before I invite Shubindu, so may I invite you to open your cameras? About 130 participants have joined us today. So if you can open your cameras, my colleague Anam is going to take a picture. So maybe you can do it now.
All right, sir, we are done.
Thank you, Anam.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let me now invite Shubindu for the demo. Shubindu, you have the floor, please.
Okay, so as Amit said, welcome back to the second consecutive session on this on GCC 2.0 project portal. So we will start off right from where we left off the other day. That is, we know that we have a mixed bag of verifiers, validators, verifiers, VVBs with us today, because that was what the primary focus was. But then we decided to include issuance also, because we couldn't cover it the other day, and we thought that we could do it together. So there are several functions which are done by the project owners, several functions done by the VVBs. So we will take it through. When we take the issuance, we'll take it together. We will first complete that part of the job, which is with the verifiers when it comes to the registration process. We had already seen the part which is played by the project owners the other day. So if I may share my screen with respect to just to show you the workflow that we were referring to the other day. Hope you can see the workflow. So So this is the one that we had shown the other day with respect to the registration one, right? So we took you through the project, of how to get on board this portal, how to create a consideration form and all. Now this is the issuance workflow that we have in front of us. So now when it comes to the issuance part of it, you have already got your accounts opened in the registration workflow that just migrates to the issuance workflow. So you have the project registered with a set of documentation, with a set of monitoring requirements, with a set of compliances within the market that you are going to target to. So when you go into the issuance phase of the portal, you just start off with implementing the project. If it's a A1 project, a project which is an A3 project or an A2 project or any other category which has already got implemented, you have to see that it's in line with the PSF. Then it start off with selecting a verifier and submission of a PMR on the portal. As a part, there are some sub-steps that come in between the blocks. When we go through the the enter workflow on the portal, you'll be able to see them. Then comes the uploading of the documents in the portal, doing a consistency check by the verifier, followed by a consistency check by GCC. Then it goes, different from GCC 1.0. In GCC 2.0, we have another set of global stakeholder consultation during the verification stage, which is only for the first verification that goes out. So we have another GSC period of 30 days. Then the verifier does the verification, comes to a conclusion with respect to a positive opinion of issuing you credits or not to issue credits based on certain issues. If they come with the opinion that the project can get issued credits with the market eligibilities that you've claimed for and the labels, then we do our part of it, which is the detailed assessment. And if there are issues identified, just like the registration workflow, we raise a clarification request. It gets responded by the verifier. If the verifier feels that they do not have the response, they can send it back to you, the project owners, for further clarity. Then that's done off the portal. Then they come back with their submission.
Shubhendu,
Yeah.
I think there is some request from one of the participants. He's requesting to if you can increase the size of this.
I think it increased it to the maximum that I could do, make an icon a little more. This is the else it will go out of the screen.
So I think there's an option. If you click your panel, you see click the view, and there's a drop down menu. You click on focus on content. If you do that, you will get an enlarged view. Maybe that might help you, Sukanta and others.
Yeah. So this is just a workflow. You'll understand better when you actually run through the different steps, in the issuance cycle and all. Just wanted to highlight that, apart from the major departure of 2.0 with 1.0 is, unlike 1.0, we have 3 rounds of iterations that can happen between GCC and the verifier. So this is the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one. And in case there are still open issues, that goes with the request for review stage. And after the end of the request for review and the response, we finally decide upon whether it's a yes or a no, whether you're issued credits or you're not issued credits. So this is overall the scheme of affairs in terms of the issuances. So now I will stop sharing this and I will go back to the main portal. I hope you can see my screen. So we used as we said, just for people who haven't come, in the previous workshop of ours or the webinar, we said that the portal generally has a tab on registration. There's one on issuance. You can also toggle between registration and issuance by using the top bar, where you can go back to registration or you can go to issuance. There's a third one, which is with respect to post-registration change, the PRCs. All the sub items under registration, like prior consideration, projects which are submitted, global stakeholder consultations, requests for review, approved projects, projects which have been decided to not to register appear on the top. This is the public view page. When it comes to issuances, you have also a similar listing of all the monitoring reports which have come to us, the issuances which have been submitted after that. The global stakeholder consultation, as we said, in the issuance also, we now have a global stakeholder consultation for the first issuance. Request for review, if there are any, that goes beyond the DA3 period. All issuances which are approved at our end, all that are not approved at our end are listed herein. Under the PRC tab, you also have all the approved PRCs. So you know all the post-registration changes that have come. If there are rejections, they do appear herein. And as a part of the PRC process, there might be a need for global stakeholder consultation, then they come here. So this is an overview of the portal herein. So the last time that we discussed upon, we had taken you through till the point where the project has completed GSC in the registration workflow and is now lying with a validator to take up the job of the validation. Now, because we have a mixed crowd here, I'll take you through that part first, where the validator knows how to take on a project, how to complete validation. What happens if he doesn't complete? Because unlike in GCC 1.0, we had a 1 year period by which the validation has to be completed. Now under 2.0, we have extended to 1.5 years. What happens after 1.5 years? That is what I'm going to show you, and what happens in that case. How does the project owner again needs to resubmit the documentation? So this project that we are talking on has verifier 1 as the validator who has been selected to carry out the validation function. So before the GSC started, the project owner has already selected the validator, which is verifier 1. So the verifier 1 logs in the portal. He sees that there is one memo item which is there on the top, which is demo project 1, which has come to start validation. The first thing first is that they have got to confirm, although you have your own way of dealing with conflict of interest and doing your contracting with the client, but we need a confirmation on the portal as well. So we ask you, do you have a conflict of interest? You can confirm that you do not have a conflict of interest. If you say, no, I do have a conflict of interest, I don't want to take up the validation, we can indicate. It will go back to the project owner to select another validator for the project. So let's move forward. You submit the conflict of interest statement to us. So that comes as a part of our audit trail that the validator had confirmed they do not have a conflict of interest and is ready to take up the validation. So now the project goes into validation. What happens in that case is the validator, he can start the validation of the project. So he can look at all that has been submitted as a part of the submission by the project owner. So when they go to the main page, you can see this project has traveled this path already. That there was an initial submission, the letter of approval has been, authorization has been approved by our end. They had made the submission of all the documents. We carried out a documentation check and we said all documents are there. The project went for a global stakeholder consultation and is now in the validation or the project verification, as used to say in the 1.0. So now the validator goes down and he sees all the documents which have been presented for the registration process. So they see the cover page here. They can see when was it uploaded. They can see the main page. They can see the calculation sheets, the environmental no-harm assessment sheets, the social no-harm assessment sheets, the SDG assessment sheets, and the signed LOA. So they have all the documents to carry out the validation. Now, what will happen is there will be iterations that happen off the portal between the validator and the project owner. So the validator will raise queries that's going to get responded to, and then you're going to have, say, for example, you complete 4 or 5 cycles in which you complete the validation process. But in the meantime, your timeline of 1.5 years has elapsed. You haven't been, the validator has not been able to submit the opinion on the project. What would happen in that case? Tushar, can you move the project back by 1.5 years and let me know?
Yes, just give me a minute.
Yeah, please. So we are, remember, we're looking at demo project 1. The project had gone into validation. You have been doing it back and forth with the client, but you couldn't resolve all the issues. But the time period that we have of submitting your opinion within 1.5 years has expired. So just like in 1.0, the project owner would need to do a re-GSC. We do not ask for a re-GSC, but we ask for a resubmission of all the documents based on the latest valid versions of the documents therein. So we will see how would you do that. So I'm asked my backend or my backend team to manually take the project backward to see that what happens after 1.5 years of time. I'm just waiting for the confirmation. So as you see, just for the others who are coming in new, when you check in as a validator, you have a dashboard here which gives you all the data on how many projects are live, which is in which stage. If you're taking up issuances, it will show up the issuances herein. If you're taking care of PRCs, it will come herein. Notifications come herein. So every stage that the project passes through, you will receive notifications, you will receive emails and everything therein. So all these are there on the left-hand side on the tab there. It takes a little time to refresh in the background. Demo project, this is the one we were looking at, right? So what happened is after 1.5 years has elapsed and you haven't been able to submit the project, the validation report, the project moves to a stage called expire. That is, you cannot do anything with the project. You cannot submit the validation report. So what has happened is now the project has actually moved back to the focal point. So in this project, the focal point is project owner 1. So it receives, so at every stage, there's a notification that goes back. So the project owner 1 gets a notification saying for this project of yours, it's been 1 year, 1.5 years that it has happened and there's no opinion. So the project has come back to you for resubmission. So the project status expired. The project owner has to now resubmit the project. So he has to go to resubmit the project. So the moment he hits the resubmit button herein, it will again take the project to the same wizard which the project owner has used to submit the project to the first phase. So it will open up the wizard. Why the wizard? Because it collects a lot of data points which we use to populate the cover page and all. These fields with respect to the title, project brief comes from the prior consideration form. You don't need to fill up anything. If there's any additional information, you can put it herein. Maybe there's none, you can put none. This is the focal point. This is the email ID of the focal point. These are the organizations who are represented as project owners in the project. These are non-editable fields because they come from the prior consideration form. Then you go to the next one, which is the technical detail. Say, for example, this is still the valid versions of the methodology. You can use it. If not, the new version, you know where to look, that if you click, you had all the valid versions coming herein. So you know that this was a wrong mistake, that this methodology should not have come. You can take it out. But when it comes to 002, 23 is the latest version because we scrap the IPCC via the UNFCCC site for data, and any updates is automatically updated at our backend on the data point. So this is still the valid version. You might have changes in credit amount. You can indicate you want to change in the label. So you see that ICVCM may not be added, so you can take it out. ICVCM, the start date of rating period, type of rating period, you can change herein during resubmissions. You can change depending upon whether the labels have changed or if your SDG goals have changed. So as we said last time, that you can add goals. If you add, it's going to move. If you remove, it's going to move back. So it automatically gets selected. Because it's a regular track project, so the TR plus should not be there. We go to the next stage, which is basically the deductions table. You have already defined the deductions herein that you're going to do. You can, if there are some errors therein, you can modify them. Move on. You have your KML file herein that gives the location of the project. Then generates your cover page. The cover page that's generated comes with a new date. That's today's date. So then it comes with a new version. So the moment you go back and refresh it, the version number changes. You go back. You are new. You're taken out ICVCM. It gets reflected on the cover page. You are still an A2 project, still an A2 project. You have got to click all the boxes that's relevant for you as you did in the first time. We do not pre-populate them because this is a legal document because you're signing it off. These are all the labels that you have chosen in the project activity. These are the deductions. These are the labels. These are the project standard. Which version is maybe it was 4.0 initially. Now it has gone to 5.0. So you have moved to the new one. Definition initially was 1.2. It might have moved to 1.3 now. Safeguards is the same, say 4. Sustainability standard the same 4. So you mention all of them, the tools that you're applying and everything. And then your two projects, so for example, you have subtype 1 that you have selected, the declaration for them. And then finally, you're going to have to download it, save the draft, review the form, download it. So when you hit the download button, first of all, it gives you a blank template of the PSF. and it is going to be the latest version which is there. So even if there's a version change, when you do the uploading for the next time, it only gives you the latest version. So you know what to use, and you have a cover page that you have got to sign and upload, right? So once you have the cover page, you have signed it off, and then you're going to do a new upload of all the documentation. So you had already uploaded these documents in the last iteration, so it shows up as to what did you submit. But in the new one, you have to choose again and resubmit the whole thing. So I'll use a dummy for the sake of ease. We had already defined that you have specified what type of Excel sheets can go in and what is the size and all that's therein. So you have to choose those documents and then move on to submission. Your billing data should not have changed in between. If it is, you're going to update it and you make a submission. So what happens is you have resubmit the project back to the validator after 1.5 years with a new set of documentation based on the valid versions available at that point in time. So the project has now again moved back to the validator. So you will see demo project 1, because we say project verification in 1.0, we have retained it. We have now moved to validation in 2.0. So you will have this transition for some time, because people might get confused with it. We tend to keep it in some places and remove it in some places, but we are going to align them. So the validator has got the revised set of documentation. He can continue doing his validations. And then when he concludes the validation process, then he will be able to present his opinion on the project activity. So what does the validator do? He logs in the portal. He finds the project is there. Now there has been several back and forth which has happened, and he has the latest version. Good enough. If there are 2 or 3 rounds still that happens with the validator and the client, he sends the project back to the focal point to upload the last version based on which he's going to give the opinion. So he will send it back to the client and say, okay, upload the last version on which we deliberated and we decided upon your opinion. If he has the final version, then he's going to move to the request for registration. He might have a positive opinion or he might have a negative opinion. If he clicks on negative, he will be presented with a box of saying what is opinion. We don't ask him to present the entire report. In the project standard, you have a list of all that he could choose from on saying why he's saying a negative outcome. If not, he's going to continue with a positive opinion. Say, for example, he has a positive opinion. He opens the request for registration form. The request for registration form is also a soft version of the one that you're using at this point in time, with a little tweaking to suit the requirements of 2.0. So the request for registration form comes to the validator, where he needs to fill up all the valid versions of the documentation based on which they are giving the opinion on the project activity. So it says demo project title. These are all auto-populated. The type of project is herein. He enters his certificate number. Then he says, okay, the project submission form was a version of 4 with a date. He can click, the date comes automatically. If it's a date before that, he can select it in. Then depending upon all that he's basing his opinion on, he can give the dates and the documentation, and then go down and he saves the draft and he previews the form and he downloads the document and he sends it back to the client for signature. So the project owner signs off saying that he agrees that the opinion is based on this set of documents and this version of documents or not. So that comes back to the validator over the mail. Now the validator will go to the wizard. What is a wizard? Wizard is basically a confirmation of all that the project owner said when he's requesting a registration of the project activity. That is why he will first be giving the opinion, saying that, okay, positive opinion, say, for DA1. That's the first check by GCC. And they confirm the rest of the values are okay. Already the sectoral scope, the methodology have been selected. They confirm that this is okay with them. Already the labels are selected. They confirm that this is okay. This is what they agreed on the SDG goal. These are the labels, additional labels. They confirm. If he feels nothing, it's not right, they can go back and send it back to the client again for modification. Reductions are there, they can confirm. that the deductions are okay. Then they come to the page where they have to upload all the documents to GCC for GCC's view on the project activity. So they're going to send across the registration form which got signed by the client, the verification report or the validation report. If they have a confidential submission, they can make a confidential submission. This is the public one. If there's an emission reduction, obviously there's an emission reduction sheet that will come here. The SDG impact documentation, you know that SDG impacts are nowadays in an Excel format under 2.0, so that will get uploaded. Environmental safeguard would get uploaded document. Social safeguard would get uploaded as a document. At this point in time, these two are the same Excel sheets. If there's an IRR involved, they're going to upload a document against IRR, which gives the IRR. There can be a confidential submission also for the IRR. And finally, the verified PSF main page will come here. If there are any additional documents, they can choose from the document tag, choose the file, and upload it. So the validator VVB has all these submissions to be made, and then comes to the next part of it, which is we require the validator to upload images of the site. This is for stakeholders' confidence. This is to take care of the fact that actually that site exists, that the project validator has gone on site, seen the main equipment. So what all has to be there in the photographs is given here. It says that the photograph has to be related to the main equipment of the project activity with the site personnel in view and the validation team in view. And it should be clear, and the background equipment should be also clearly identifiable. If you have done a remote audit and you haven't gone on site, then you have got to provide visuals of the remote audit. So you have got to choose at least 2 photographs as an evidence that you had visited on site and seen the main equipment or consulted the local stakeholders and all. If you want, you can keep adding as many images that you want. And you have got to make a short video of the site and upload it as well. Not the direct video, but the URL where the video is uploaded because of the size restrictions. You can then finalize your submission and submit it to GCC. So this is the very validator's job on submitting a request for registration to GCC. Now what has happened? The project has got uploaded. It has come to GCC demo 1 for scheduling and doing a detailed assessment. So now TL, the technical lead of GCC, will now do the scheduling of the project activity and will assign the project to an officer to carry out the due diligence of this project activity. So in between, as I said, all the personnels involved, all the entities involved keep receiving emails of where the project is going and all. So they will assign an officer to the project. So they can select from the officers which work on GCC to do, say, for example, he says officer number 1 or officer number 2 does the due diligence, and there's a timeline in which is awarded. He has to complete it by this date, and he assigns the project. So it goes to the officer. So once done, the officer would get a trigger saying that there is a project which is lying in his login, and he has to go in and perform a due diligence of the submission that has been made by a validator. So the officer logs in the portal. He goes to the registration tab. He sees demo project 1 sitting therein with a submission date and a target deadline which is inside. Is it 1 or 2?
It's 2.
2. Okay. So he can in turn decide to take up the due diligence himself, or he can assign an expert. So we have 30 experts which are there, who are extended arms, who does the due diligence on our behalf. So he can assign the project to an expert to do that, or he can himself do the due diligence. So he does himself, say, for example, the DA1. What is DA1? DA1 is a detailed assessment check of all the submission that has been done. This is based on a checklist-driven approach that is already there on our GCC portal. So the same thing is made in a soft version here. So he is presented with a horde of checklist points in which he is going to check the project activity. He might have issues, he might not have issues, depending upon whether he has an issue. So he's going to raise an issue. Say, for example, he has an issue number 1. And he classifies it as a major issue, and that is also the issue because the only place where it's given as a final finding is if it comes from an expert. The officer has to agree to the issue and raise it as a finding to the client. So that is why there's a separate space called final. So he might have 2 issues, so he's going to mark both of them as not okay, raise an issue. So we raise 2 issues, that is issue number 1 and issue number 2, and we mark both as major. And he says issue 2 is also the final issue, which will go to the client. So, and he can also add any, because what we do is we as GCC can also give you commented versions of the PSF, commented versions of the validation report just for ease of comfort, where we highlight and give you. So he can also upload documents here. They can upload certain documents here, which is the commented version, and give it to the validator. So once he's done through this, he will save the draft and he will make a submission. Herein, he will be shown that these are the 2 issues that you're raising as a part of your finding. He will confirm that it is the same and he will submit the detailed assessment report. In spite of having, because we are now sending back the comments back to the client, he will be presented again with the clarification note. So he will be again seeing the clarification request form, which is being raised with the 2 issues that he has seen. So he will be presented the clarification note saying that you are raising clarification request to the validator on this project activity, and these are the issues, and this is the classification of the issues. Because when it finally goes to the request for review stage, it is only the major issues which go out. Okay, so they will be seeing issue 1, issue number 2 categorized as major issue, and they will say yes, this is the one that I want to send out as a clarification, and this goes to the next stage. So what does the validator get? Validator gets a trigger saying that the project has come back with issues. So what will the validator do? The validator will log into the portal because it's now moved to DA2. So the validator will log into the portal. He has already the project in his queue. He sees that the project has come back with a clarification request. So he can see the clarification request if he wants. If he opens up, he will be presenting the same form. He can have the answers to all that GCC has raised, so he can decide not to send the project back to the focal point asking for clarity. If he doesn't have clarity and he needs that to be clarified, he can send it back to the focal point to update the PSF with the responses. That happens off the portal. They are going to respond back to the verify manner, to agree, send it back. That again happens between the validator and the project owner. And then finally, they have a set of documents based on which they can again give a new opinion. So it will be sent back to the focal point to upload the last set of documents. After they've received it, they will go to request again a new fresh submission for a request for registration. He will again be presented with a new version of the RFR because it might have in the PSA version changed, the emission reductions were changed, the E+ environmental safeguards and social safeguards have changed, the SDG impacts might have changed. So he will be again presented with the same wizard that was there in the initial submission with the second set of opinion on behalf of the validator. So he will first download with, so all the previous versions are there. So for example, it might have now moved to 5.0. The emission initiative might have changed from 3.0 to 3.2. The investment analysis might have gone to 4.0 version. So all these will be changed. You will again save draft, review the form, download the document, and send it to the client for signature. And then he will move on and submit the project again. So he will be again going back to the mainframe where he will go back and he will go to the wizard. He will be presented the same wizard wherein the new changed submissions are there. He will then say, okay, validation, positive, DA2. Now, why are we writing this DA1, DA2? I will show a little later. So he confirms the values. We will just rush through the slides so that it's a bit quicker. He confirms that all these that has been presented as a part, and he submits all the documents, the new set of documents again. So just bear with me by the time I actually upload these documents. IRR, say some document, nothing in confidential, and the verified project submission form, min, any other documents, already the images are there. If he wants to upload any new images, yes, good enough. If not, he can just finalize the submission and present it to GCC. So it will go for DA2, but his job doesn't end here. What will happen is there is one step still missing. That is, he has been presented a clarification note wherein there were issues. So you'd have to respond to those clarification issues. So what will happen is he will be presented with a soft version of the clarification note wherein the issues would be there and the response to those issues he has got to give. That's an official confirmation on behalf of the validator that he has closed out all the issues which are raised by GCC. So this is the response sheet. These were the issues which was marked as major. The validator says that issue resolved. Issue resolved. So this is the official response from the validator with respect to the issues which were therein. And then they're going to submit, make the submission. So that completes the job of the validator in submitting the project back to GCC for the next round of DA. So this follows through from DA1 to DA2 to DA3. If there are balance issues, they get just in replacing request for clarification, it would become request for review. And once the request for review comes, it's going to go out on public. There would be a period, but then please note that each of the steps which are there, which have, whether it's GCC, whether it's the validator, whether it's the project owner, each step has a duration by which it has to be completed. So when it had come back to the validator, it had a target deadline by which it had to be completed. This project has come to a clarification note stage wherein there is a deadline that this response has to go in within 60 days. So we have defined that in the, if you go to the program process, you'll find the timelines for each of the steps. So each entity is given a finite timeline in which it has to go back. Even GCC, when it comes, then there is a deadline by which GCC has to come back to the client with the findings. What happens if they don't? Then there's a separate module that runs, which is called the VVBs performance module. Though, or if they miss these deadlines, then that goes as an entry into the performance module. And not only that, the verifier has to send us a request to extend this deadline with reason why it could not be completed within 60 days. So that becomes a noting in the performance of the validators. So that is how we track the performance of each of the entities in this whole workflow. Okay. So when it comes to the registration process, these are the different steps where the validators get involved. This is how the project owners get involved on the portal. So if there is any question that you might have, you can let me know now, else I will move to the issuance part.
I think there is one question, Shubhendu. The
Okay.
last one with regard to photographs, whether they need to be geotagged or simple picture.
Yeah, you can geotag it, you can have a time stamping on it depending upon, but it's okay. We need only the photograph with the main equipment in the background, with the validation team gone on site and the client in the picture. So we know that all of them are there in the picture and it has to be uploaded. The n number of uploads that you can do, that's okay with us, not a problem. Okay, so I will again share the screen and we will go to the issuance workflow now. Now, before I go to the issuance workflow, there is this thing which everyone has been waiting for, is a post-registration change. So I'll just run through the logic block of a post-registration change so that you know how the post-registration change is going to run. So post-registration change, and we know that it's something that everyone is looking forward to because there's a lot of PRCs which are sitting there in and all. So how does the whole thing happen? Post-registration change can be identified at 2 points in time. One can be that the project owner themselves are aware that there is a change in the project activity, whether it's a design change, whether there's a monitoring change, whether there's something that got missed out during the registration phase and that needs to be fixed and all. So there is a PRC identified at the first go. The second is there is a post-registration change that's identified as a part of the verification process. That's not aware, the focal point is not aware that results in a PRC. The verifier has taken up the job, and then during the process of verification, they identify, oh, it doesn't match with what is there in the registration, so there's a PRC which is triggered. So there are two tracks in which PRC comes. So say the issuance process starts, and there is a PRC that's identified early on by the focal point. They know that there's a PRC. He can directly trigger a PRC start. The moment he triggers a PRC start, there is a change form that comes. The change forms is basically an intimation of what is that which is the change that they're trying to notify on. So once we move to the change form, we'll see what are the different heads therein. And they assign a verifier for this PRC period, for this monitoring period, and the PRC to be taken care of. The verifier would have the access to the change form, and then there will be a set of questions that he would need to respond to. If the focal point does not know there's a PRC and he wants to go to the normal course, and he selects the PMR period and he selects a verifier. That's how the whole issuance workflow starts. That is, you select a PMR period, monitoring period, and you select a verifier who's going to take up the job, and you move forward. Then in this block of the issuance process, that the documents are submitted, the verifier looks at the documents, and they decide, oh, there's a PRC. He identifies a PRC. That's the second track where the PRC can happen. Then the verifier is going to send the project back to the focal point to fill up this form, which is the change form. In this case, there's no requirement of assigning a verifier again because the verifier is already identified here. The verifier again assesses this form and it comes to a set of questions, which is the change temporary or permanent? If it's a temporary change, then this is they can take it as a part of the issuance track. So they will decide whether this is acceptable to them, and they will follow the issuance block and submit it as a part of their issuance request. If they say, no, it's a permanent change, then it says, is it a change in the start date? If it's a change in the start date, the next question is the date change more than a year or less than a year? If it is less than a year, then there will be a notification to GCC saying that this project is requesting a permanent change in the start date of the project activity and is less than a year. Then GCC is going to take a view and say, yes, okay, I accept to it. It again goes back to change the monitoring period change, and then again it goes to the issuance track. If it is for more than a year, then it may call for a revalidation. It may say the circumstances have changed, the initial investment details which were there has changed, the project got changed in the start date because the project got implemented 2 years from what it thought it to be. Then comes the question of, so does the initial assumptions hold good now that the project has got implemented later on? So there might be a need of a validation. So the validator there will be a call for a validation action here. So the validator would have to be selected, and they have to submit the documentation to their due diligence on the project activity. If there's a permanent change and not involving a start date change, it might be a change in design, it might be a change in monitoring plan, which is permanent. There's a change in from 1.0 to 2.0 involving new standards coming in and requirements coming in. There would be a requirement of a validator who's going to come in and say that there is no change in additionality, no change on baseline, no change with respect to, or insignificant change with respect to the emission reductions potential of this project activity, no new implications on social safeguards and environmental safeguards, no implications in terms of sustainable development impacts on the project activity. Give their opinion, and then it goes the registration pathway of actually doing a due diligence with GCC, sending back questions as clarification note, getting it qualified, and then once approved, it comes back to the issuance workflow. So this is the logic which is there for a PRC workflow. Okay. So let's now move back to the portal. How does the portal handle it? So we said in the portal, there's a registration tab, there's an issuance tab. The moment you go to an issuance tab, the same focal point who has the project which is registered and is now ready to go into the issuance phase is going to log into the portal. The moment they log into the portal on the issuance tab, they will see the list of projects which are already registered and can go into issuance. It gives them a classification of how many monitoring reports have been uploaded, how many issuances are in progress, and how many have been concluded. Just understand conclusion can be positive or negative. So it's a summation of all. If you want to see what is inside, then if you click inside, then it presents you all what are those submissions, what is the PMR name, what is the period, and what is the status. So it gives you a further details. Say, for example, demo 3 is the one where I wanted to view all that's therein. There is no new issuances which is there in this. It is just got registered and wants to move into the issuance part. Note, the creating period start is 3/1/17 to 1/1/27. That's the creating period. Now he says add a monitoring report. It will ask for a start date and end of the monitoring period. Start date is already taken from your creating period start date. So you don't need to change anything. You just need to select the end of the creating period. So say, for example, they say 2017 to 2018, 1st of Jan, I want to do, and select a verifier for this project activity. And then comes the question, do you have a PRC already identified in this project activity? If they say yes, then it will say provide a description. You might say the monitoring period, there's a temporary change in the monitoring requirements in this project activity. There's a temporary change. Or is there a change in creating period? If you say yes, then it will say, what is the new creating period? So depending upon your response, it will decide whether it's less than 1, more than 1, temporary or permanent that the system will try to configure. So say, for example, we're taking a vanilla one where there's nothing like that. And there are all these checks and balances that the verifier cannot be the validator. So in this project, GCC verifier, GCC1 was the validator, so he cannot do the verification. So the system has a safeguard that is not going to allow the same person to do the validation as well as the verification. So they select GCC, the verifier number 2, to take up the job of the verification. So you have already added a monitoring period, you have already chosen a verifier. So the project owner would then have to submit a PMR. He can download the main template, fill it up, and then go to submission of the PMR. PMR again starts with a wizard. The first part of it is auto-populated for what was there in the registration workflow. There's nothing that you can change or you need to change herein. So you move to the next one. You have already decided upon the methodology and the sectoral scope. You cannot change. This is already the validated emission reductions per year, which is there. Now comes the claim. What are you claiming, right? So depending upon the monitoring period that you have chosen, we chose 17 to 18. There are these classifications of before 1st of Jan 21, 21 to 23, 23, 24 to 26 and all. System automatically tells you which one to fill. You cannot enter anything in the others because it's 17 to 18. So say, for example, herein it's around, instead of 75,000, you have 70,000 of claim here. Your market eligibility is you do not have first phase. So you know it's a 17 to 8, you don't have a first phase. You don't have a Corsia where you do 6.2, you're not claiming, you want a vanilla. You might also ask for an AREC because we allow that the project asks for AREC here and also. Okay, so you can choose market eligibility. Waiting period is fixed here. Let's move on. You have the claim, you said you're going to claim for EL and BSL, that's mandatory. You said you're going to ask for EBL, but you found that you don't have all the documentation. You cannot ask for an EBL. You said you're going to look for a gold label, but you found that these 4 are the ones that you're claiming. You don't have 3. You can take it out. You have a silver claim. Or if you say, no, I have all, I can ask for a gold, as I had said during the registration process. Let's take out one and say he moves his claim to silver. The rest is already pre-selected. He moves to the next one. These are the period before, that is 17 to 18. These are the deductions which are therein. So he says, I don't have a buffer, non-permanence buffer. I have a corresponding, I don't have a corresponding, I'm not claiming for 6.2 or code share, first phase. I don't have an SOP because I don't need a host country letter of authorization. I don't have ONG. I don't have an adaptation fund. It's not an ICVCM project. So whatever are the gross is their net, there's no deductions herein. He moves forward. Now, under GCC 2.0, we said that the credits can be split between 3 entities. During the letter of authorization, this project has said they want the split to happen between A, B, and C. A is between organization 1, B is organization 2, C is focal point 2, organization 3. They say that it has to be 40, 40. So what happens if I put a 30 here in? It will say it cannot be more than 100%, obviously, so that validation is there. It cannot be less than that as well. So this is how the credits would get split between the 3 organizations. You can also have a 50 and a 50 and a 0. This project hasn't become operational. It has a claim of 0. So, okay. So this is the split that's going to happen. We will be presented with all the KML file which is uploaded at the time of registration. So it's okay that there's no change in this project activity. The KML file remains the same. He is presented with the soft copy of the cover page. The cover page has all the pre-populated details of the web links, the details, that the KML file is there. It's a regular track project, fixed rating period. Monitoring period is already selected by the wizard in the first phase. First monitoring period, this is the first version with the date. The registered PSF dates and everything automatically comes from your registration workflow. Then comes your verification number and the PVR report number. So all these comes, then applied methodologies and this distribution. This was supposed to be 75,000. You said, as a part of the registration request, because it can be multiple, it can be for 2 years, 2 months and all. So it's a blank one. You can enter therein. You didn't have any deductions under any. These are the different labels that you have selected for. These are the SDG goals that you are targeting. You claim for silver instead of gold, which was there in the registration process. And there are several checkboxes that you have got to confirm that you're going to abide with. You fill each of them up, go down, save draft, review the form, download. So what you'll have as a download is the PMR cover page and the monitoring report template, the main body, which is the latest version. You fill up everything and you move to the next part of it, which is submission. The billing detail, that is, who's the guy who's going to pay for it when it comes to the issuance fee. So you're going to say, this is the company who's going to pay if it's the same guy, you can put who's the guy, who's therein, what is the email address, there can be a secondary email address, what is the name of the guy therein, if there's a tax ID therein, and you fill in the billing detail. This is all required for the accounts department so that they do not have to come back to the project owners again asking who's the guy I'm going to bill to. So this is built into the system. So once this is done, it is uploaded directly, and then it goes to the next stage, which is the documentation check. After the upload of all the documents. So he's going to upload the cover page, signed off, the main monitoring report in a PDF version, the new calculation sheets, the assessments after the project is put in place, social assessment after it's put in place, SDG impacts depending upon the silver level that he is asking for. Any other documents that he wants to upload as a part of the submission can be selected. You can add as many. You can keep adding as many documents as you want as a part of the submission. Finalize, submit. So your PMS submission is over for the issuance part. Now, when the issuance is there, so what they can do is that they can only change a verifier. This was a question that had come last time. That can the project owner change verifier? They can change the verifier at any point in time. So even if now they decide, no, I'm not going to give it to verifier number 2, I want to give it to 3, they can do that. They can change the verifier. So let's not do that. So we said that the project is with the verifier number 2. The verifier number 2 gets a trigger that there is a PMR which is submitted, and he has to check whether the documentation has been completed. So the verifier logs into the system. Under the issuance workflow, you will see this demo project has come for an initial review. He has to then first accept the contract, saying that I do not have a conflict of interest. I'm okay with taking up the job as a verifier for this project activity. Once it's accepted by their end, it will then go for an initial review of the PMR stage. Okay. What all does the PMR have? It has all that is being claimed by the project, by the project owners. It will have all that deductions which are there and gross amounts. It will have all the issuances documents which has been given as a part of the issuance, the PMRs, the registration documents against which he can check. So what will happen is he can approve or he can reject. So once, if he rejects, what will happen? It will go back to the focal point saying, and when he rejects, he's going to say why he's rejecting. If he approves, then he can approve the PMR submission. So the PMR moves forward. It goes to GCC. That this PMR is approved and it goes to GCC for the initial assessment. Again, in GCC, who does it for GCC? So again, the tech lead will decide who's the guy who's going to take up the job of doing the initial assessment on part of GCC. There's no problem because we are keeping the registration one when we are logging in. So it's landing up on the registration page. He has to move to the issuance page where the tech lead will know that there is a project which has to be assigned. Okay, it's with the admin then here. So because he's an admin guy, he has a lot of other stuff also here in. He has to look at methodologies, he has to look at tools, he has to look at everything. So you find a lot of other tabs which are there and which is not there. So 3 is the one that we were doing it. So there's only one PMR which is there. And we can update it. Tushar?
Yeah, just 1 second, sir. We are looking it. Just 1 second.
Yeah. By the time you look at it and tell me who's assigned on this, I'll take them through the PMR one. Okay. So now, yeah, coming back to the first part, which is with respect to raising the PRC. Okay, so demo 3 is there's already one PMR which is there. Say, for example, for this project in the second PMR, there's a requirement of a PRC. So, when he adds a new PMR, the end date of the first PMR was 1/1. This by default takes the next date, which is 2, as the start of the next PMR. You can change it, but the system will throw up an error because they will see that there is a gap in between the first and the second, which is not allowed. So say, for example, you select anything, say July 10th, and you select the same verifier 2, and you say request a PRC, and you say it's a permanent change. Now, if you see that tab with respect to change in trading period is not there. That is because change in trading period can only be done during the first issuance. Now that we have already initiated the first issuance with a started a trading period, you cannot change the trading period now. So that tab is not there from the second onwards. It's only either permanent or a temporary change that you can request for. So you can add a PRC here, right? Now what will happen is system will say, no, you can't do that because your start date is supposed to be the second, you've taken a third. So you have to start from the second. So all these validations are built in. You can add a PMR, but you've actually raised a PRC request in this. So the moment you raise a PRC request, you will be asked to fill up the change form. So what will happen is you will have the soft version of the change form. Let's look at what the change form asks you to do. So the post-registration change form will ask you, the reference number will come later on once it's allotted. So there's nothing herein. This is what had been as per the registered documents. You had said that you're going to do this and this. It's a regular project, regular project. Now it will ask you what is the deviation that you have. If it's a temporary deviation or a permanent deviation. If you say it's a permanent deviation, and you say it's a change in the monitor, you can then ask, what is it? Change in monitoring plan, change in GHG, social safeguard, inclusion of monitoring plan, change in project design, whatever it is. If you say it's a change in project design, or it's a transition to GCC 1, you can have multiple ones, 1.0 to 2.0. This is with respect to temporary. We are not doing with temporary ones. We are focusing on permanent. What is the type of change that you're doing? You've got to fill it up. You have to say what are the documents that you're including herein, whether there's an increase in capacity or decrease in capacity in the project activity. If you say it's a decrease in capacity, or you might be asking for a new set of labels in this project activity. You will have an what are you giving as a part of your update? If it's an updated PSF form, an updated environmental safeguard, social safeguard, SDG, emission reductions, what all you're giving, then you're going to save it, download the PDF form, sign it off, and submit it. So it's there. So you have to submit the PMR. Oh, sorry, the PRC.
Subin sir,
Yeah.
you can have the technical login to assign that project.
That's okay. I'll come back to it. So we are in the issuance one now. So we raised a PRC in demo 3. So you had two. The first one is for initial assignment of the officer. That's with GCC. This one has a PRC request with that. Now, what can happen is you go to PRC. You will see the PRCs which we have raised here, right? So you can see that this is a PRC that you have triggered in this project activity. And you can assign a validator to take up, because it's a permanent change, you can assign a validator to take up the job. The moment you assign a validator, the validator will do the job of going through the documentation and everything and taking it forward. So this is the PRC route of how a PRC gets triggered. Coming to the issuance part of it, which we were doing at this point. So you said it's with tech lead, right?
Yes, tech lead.
Okay. So the tech lead is here. So he gets a mail saying that there is a PMR which has got cleared by the verifier. It is now with GCC. To schedule to give it to an officer who does an assessment of it. So PMR, demo 3, 1, initial, assign an officer. So he has his own setup. We have officers, we can decide whom to give it to. So we give it to officer number 1 with a date he can assign, and he assigns to the officer. So then our officer has to take up the documentation check in this case. So these two are PRC requests which are therein already. So the technical lead can see everything what's happening to all projects. So the GCC officer one is given the job of carrying out documentation check in this project activity. They will carry out the documentation and consistency check. So demo number 3, document, fixed waiting period, monitoring period, everything therein, and with a target date. So you will see the date of evaluation comes as a default on the date that he opens up this form. It gives him the monitoring period, the monitoring number. We have a unique submission number against each of the monitoring. He has this checkbox of that is everything uploaded, is everything there, so that the global stakeholder consultation can happen. If he says that everything is fine, he can toggle and say, no, there's an issue therein. He can say there's some issue. He says, no, there's no issue. On confirmation, he can toggle it to OK. If he sends it back, he can send it back to the focal point for rectification, or he can approve the monitoring report. And so he can just say approve the monitoring report and it moves it forward. So if the monitoring report is approved, there's no further change which is required in this project. So the project now moves to a global stakeholder consultation. As we said, the first period under verification goes for a GSC. So if you actually go to the public page under issuance, the project will land up here as one which is seeking global stakeholders inputs. So it would say there's a 1 month period in which people can comment on this. They can look at all the documents under these tabs. They can see that there's no comments which are raised. If they want, they can go and add comments to this. For that, like in the registration process, they have got to fill up the names, the organization that they represent, the address of the organization, the telephone number if they have to be contacted by the verifier for further clarity, the email, the project numbers are here. They can say 1 observations against the PMR with some sections and some comments herein. They can keep adding as they want. If they want, they can take out those sections if there's none, and they can submit the comment. During submission, like in the registration process, if they want to upload any documentation, as I said, if there's a local stakeholder, he wants to give a representation of the local community that they have a problem with the project activity, they can upload their documentation. If there is something in public view that the verifier should know of, that this project is affecting the local community or in some manner the environment or society, they can upload proof of that and all. They can choose whatever they want, or if they want, they can simply submit the comment without submitting anything, right? So the submission will be completed. Once completed, then it's going to show up on public view as a comment. If they have uploaded any document along with it, it will also show up the document on public view. So when I go back to the main page of public view for PMR GSC, because there's one comment, it will show the number of counts of comments which have come in. If they want to view the comments, they can go in and view the comments. Now, Tushar, can you take it out of GSC period and let me know?
Yes, sir. Good. Yeah, just wait for a few more seconds.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just logging in. So because it's under GSC, there's nothing that he can do. The verifier cannot do anything. He's waiting for the GSC to be completed. Then only he can start the verification process. So the backend team is working on pushing the GSC period back so that we can release it of GSC. So it's now out of the GSC period. So he can now go ahead and do the verification of the project activity. So then he can recommend a PRC. So if he finds that there is a PRC in this project during the process of verification, he can recommend a PRC herein. The moment he recommends a PRC, it will again go back to the focal point asking for the change form. He has to fill up the change form. It will come back to the verifier. The verifier has to decide whether it's a change in trading period or whatever it is and all, or it's a permanent change or a temporary change, and define which pathway it is going to take. Or if there's none, like in the registration process, you can ask the focal point to update the PMR based on the last iteration that has happened with the verifier, or he can then go in with directly issuing a verifier opinion of whether they want to submit a request for issuance or not. Like in the registration process, this part of the workflow is very similar to that of the registration, because it involves submission of the request for issuance forms, it involves the submission of the wizard with all the values, the submission of the final set of documentation, and again scheduling on behalf of GCC, doing a detailed assessment check based on the checklist, raising clarification notes and getting it clarified. And if it doesn't happen within 3 iterations of each other, then it goes for a request for review, RFI. Okay, so for example, here it has the verifier certificate number. It says final monitoring report. What is it? Emission reductions, which version? Emission reduction. Labels, if there are any host country letter that's associated, if there is any proof of payment that needs to be uploaded. So it's like the RFI that we have. It is then saved at the end, downloaded, and sent to the focal point for signature. So the focal point confirms that this is the set of documentation based on which the request for issuance has been submitted. Then the verifier goes to the wizard, wherein the verifier has already, the project owner has already populated what is his claim. The verifier says verification opinion positive, claims substantiated. So he can make a positive recommendation. He knows that the claim has been for 75,000. He knows that the market is for GCC. He can just confirm that he is aware of it and he agrees with it. These are the labels that have been opted for: EL and SL, not for any EBL, not for any SBL, silver. He can confirm that. Deductions is already decided to be 0. You can confirm that. The project's location, the split is 50-50. He has nothing to do with it because this is a call of the project owner. You can just confirm that. The site location is already decided and mapped in the map box. There is no change in the site when he has gone. He can confirm that. He can then request the forms to the final forms, the signed request for issuance form, the verification report. If he wants any private submission, he can make a private submission, the verify emission reduction sheets, the PMR cover page, the PMR main sheet, the SDG impact document, the environmental no harm assessment, the social no harm assessment. There's one thing that you need to see herein, that we, in spite of the fact that projects would do a submission under the GCC 2.0, we haven't kept environmental no harm and social no harm as a mandatory document. Why? Because we're not going to deal with transition today, okay? Because there's a separate session that's going to come with transition. There are a set of projects already registered with GCC. They want to go ahead with the issuance, but they don't want to move to GCC 2.0. They want to continue with GCC 1.0. Then in GCC 1.0, there is no requirement with respect to submitting Excel sheets on environmental safeguards and social safeguards or SDGs. So that is why these are not mandatory fields which are kept herein, because they can continue and they can say herein, put in a dummy document. It's not a mandatory, so they don't need to put anything, a dummy document herein. They can just go ahead with the submission herein. So that is why, to facilitate both track 1 and track 2, GCC 1.0 and GCC 2.0 in this issuance workflow, has this been not kept mandatory so that they can make the submissions. Any new things? Yes, they can add to it. Any site images that he has as a ton of verification has to be uploaded. Again, the guidelines are the same as that in the registration process. 2 set minimum, add as many as you want. Video, yes, you can keep adding as many as you want, make a final submission. So the verifier has given the opinion with respect to that they want a positive opinion on this. And so now it goes to GCC for scheduling and doing an assessment in the same way as it was done in the case of a registration workflow. So in the issuance pathway, I was thinking when they're going to come. So demo 3, EMR 1 is under PRC, 1 is under scheduling. We can put, so the technical lead has the capability of putting any project on hold. If there's something wrong, if there's a reporting against a project activity, if there's non-payments or there is something that has happened, they can put the project on hold with a reason for it. So if the moment they put on hold, they can also unhold a project with a reason. Or he wants to go in the more normal course, he can assign an officer to this activity. So for example, officer 1 is the one that he assigns, who was the one who did the documentation check in the first go. This Tushar keeps playing with me. So he can again assign an expert intern. He can in turn do it himself. So if he decides to do it himself, then he will again have the soft copy of the due diligence, the detailed assessment sheet. So say, for example, we decide that we're not going to send it to anyone. We decide everything is fine with this issuance request. Everything is okay. There's nothing which is not okay in this, right? So everything is okay in this. So it's a huge form with all the subsections on the checklist that he has to go through. So because he doesn't have any comment on any of the parameters and anywhere in the PMR, he can just go and say there's nothing in this. It's clean. So he can say save. He can preview. And he can submit. So it says no observation raised. To proceed, the next step that has to happen is he has to prepare a summary note for that, okay? Because summary note is something which is an internal documentation that gets presented to the project approval committee, which in turn sends it to as a request to our steering committee. Because all registrations and issuances are not done by GCC, it is approved by the steering committee, which is sitting outside GCC, which gives their final opinion with respect to issuances. Amit, you wanted to say something?
No.
Okay, right. So what I has to do, he said everything is fine. There's no problem in the project. Issuances can go through all levels and market eligibility is okay with. So the officer would have to prepare a summary note. So he's presented with a soft version of the summary note, although none of these activities are related to the verifier validator or to the project owner. Just to sake of clarity of how things move forward within GCC, we're just taking you through. So the summary note is a document wherein the officer again writes what is the number of the verification report which came in, when did it come, when the project was started. Say, for example, 2017, we said something like 3rd of Jan is when the project started. What are the claims with respect to ACCs in previous claims till date? There's nothing that this project has claimed. So he's going to put all those. Then he's going to say whether the host country letter of authorization has been received if the project is claiming for a CA plus label or is claiming for a first phase. If the project owners have created their IHS market account or the transaction registry account, it comes here in. What is the register project saying? If it's a 75,000 that the register project is saying, the initial public report had a 70,000 claim, but subsequently it got revised to 68,000 and our recommendation to the steering committee is 68,000. Then all of them comes here in. The project has asked for EL, EBL, SL, SBL. We said we are going to give them SDG label. We said we are going to give them silver. These are the different SDGs which we are going to give. That's what we said herein, right? So we said we're going to give 6, we're going to give 9, and we're going to give 13. There's no host country letter of attestation because it's a 2017 claim. CORSIA label, first phase, pilot phase. First phase is what was there in the registered document. Pilot phase was not asked for, so they won't get any. So we say automatic issuances that we recommendation, and then we have got to write in each of the sections why we are doing so. So these are our standard checklists which you have got to fill and say what is everything okay with respect to greenhouse gas, with respect to environmental safeguards, social safeguards, SDG certification, CORSIA, market eligibility, ICVCM market eligibility, 6.2 market eligibility. So what are we asking? The client might have asked for AREX. So are we ever giving AREX, or are we saying we're going to issue ACCs? What are the vintages that we're getting? So if you say we are giving them a vintage of 2017, and there's nothing with 2018, it's only 2017, that's okay. These are the labels that you're awarding. This is the silver. We are not giving them any label with respect to CORSIA because in the registration they're asked for first phase. This is not a first phase relation. This is the claim 70,000. Herein we said that the shares are 50% for this entity, 50% for the second entity, 0% for the third. So we know of 50,000 herein, there is 35,000. That goes to herein, there are no deductions. So we have to fill up all this information and send it to the project approval committee. So they know that what goes, who gets how much of the credits. This one, 0. We are not giving them anything because this project might not have already started. So they don't have a claim during this period. And there are no deductions in this, right? Good. So we fill up, we say we're done. I'm the officer, I've completed my documentation and I submit it. So I'm submitting the summary note with all information to the project approval committee to be able to take a view on my request for issuance on this project activity. So now it goes first to the TL approvals, right? So the tech lead herein is the guy who does the due diligence of my summary note. So the TL says, what can he do? He can put the project on hold if he finds it's not okay. He can change officer, but it's not of use now because the officer already done the run. He can look at the summary note. He will be presented with the same note, but in a non-editable manner. He can send the note back to the officer for updation. He can say, there is something which is wrong in this note. This part is not clear. I don't understand stuff. He can send it back to the officer. He can say that there are major findings in the summary note, which he wants to directly flag it as a part of the clarification request. That is, he can say that I don't need to send to the officer. I find there is something which is totally wrong in this project activity. I will send it for DA2 directly to the client. So he can directly send it as a clarification request. Or if he finds everything is fine with the summary note, he can send it to the steering committee. So he says, okay, everything is fine. I don't find an issue in this. I don't need to move it to the officer. I don't need to move it to the client. I can directly send it to the steering committee. So it will go to the steering committee for their approval. The steering committee have their separate logins in GCC. So we have 10 steering committee sitting who takes care of all our requests for registration and our request for issuances. The steering committee, when they log into the system, they already, obviously, they get a trigger saying that there is a project which has come seeking their approval. So the login, they go to their issuance page, they sees that this, again, as I said, even the steering committee has a deadline in which you have got to give their opinion. So they have a 10-day period in which they have got to give their opinion. So 15th was when they received, 25 is by which they have got to give. If they don't give any opinion by 25, then it is deemed they don't have an issue in this project activity. But it's always encouraged that they go look at the summary note and then they send in their review comments. What can the steering committee do? The steering committee can do three things. One is they can say, I issue the credits, or they say, I issue with lower amount of labels or credits, or I say I have objections. So they can raise an objection, say I have an objection, and this is the rule that it violates. Or they can have multiple objections. They can say I have another objection, and this is the rule that it violates. So they can list the objections. They can say, I need a clarity. There's a clarification request. They can say, I have an improvement point, that in future you should be also mentioning this. Or I find that this tool is not properly representing situations. This has to be modified. The moment these kind of improvement points comes triggered, that automatically goes to a regulatory committee who takes care of all the procedures and methodologies and everything. They get a trigger that there is an improvement point suggested by the steering committee. Say, for example, they have no objections, no clarification, is fine with it. It just says, I'm okay with it, issue the credits, and he submits a review. The moment he submits a review, it becomes non-editable on their part. He cannot go back and say, no, I missed out something. So he has a double confirmation to give, and that's out. He cannot do anything more. Okay. So this is a summary note that he had seen, based on which he had given the opinion of recommendation for the project. Now, there's only one thing that I wanted to show you, that is because it's in the testing server, it takes a little time of loading. So this is a summary note which has come right to them with all that the officer had said herein, with all the recommendations, with all the splits and all that had been given therein. So this is what had come. If the team leader had any comment, he would have put his comment herein and sent back. If there are any issues which he wanted to trigger and send back to the client, he would have put the issues herein and send it back to the client. So there are none which are herein. Now, with respect to the project view, how does the project view look like? Now it has two sets of. It has project details. You see the verifier's opinion. What did the verifier say? It has GSC comments. What was the GSC comment? He can see completeness check, whether the due diligence, when they do the documentation check, whether everything was fine. He can see what was claimed and what was finally given by the verifier. So you can see that all of them. What was claimed and what was verified. What were the documents which were there in PMR1 which were uploaded? What were the documents with respect to the registration requirements? So this is all that the steering committee sees. So there are 10 steering committee members. Each of them can go log in and give their comments. Tushar, can you take it out of the 10-day period for the steering committee?
Yes. Give me a moment.
So the period for the steering committee is over. Now the officer who prepared the summary note would be able to see all the comments which are raised by the steering committee members. We know that the steering committee member, number one, did not give anything. The rest of the steering committee members in the last 10 days did not provide any comment. So it says no steering committee observations raised. There is a guidance at the bottom which says only if there are objections which are raised by the steering committee members does the project go into a loop. If there are recommendations for improvement, if there are clarification requests, the project doesn't stand therein, it moves forward for issuances, right? So he sees that there are no steering committee recommendations which have come or objections that have come. He will then send it to the project approval committee to finally decide upon whether the issuance should happen in this project or it would not happen in this project activity. So what can the PAC do? The PAC can see what the recommendations were for the committee members, so they can individually see as to who recommended what. So they can individually see 1, 2, 3 and all. If there was only one steering committee who commented, he can see the recommendation. If there are 10, there would be 10 therein. Okay. So because there is one, it only shows up one here. He can then, looking at the comments, decide. We can have a consolidated view. They can decide not to issue. If it goes to the RFA stage, then it's an issue or not to issue. They can send it for clarification if they found that there are issues which neither the officer figured out, neither the steering committee raised, but as the PAC committee, they decided there are issues which can be sent as clarification to the next round, asking for client to the focal point to clarify. Else, if everything is fine, he can then ask the accounts to raise an issuance invoice against the amount of credits that is getting invoiced in this project activity. So it will go for the payment. The payment to be made. The accounts guy is going to log in. He's going to raise the invoice. The focal point is to make the payment, and he's going to raise an invoice on the billing guy who's given in the wizard. So the accounts would go in, log in, raise an invoice. The focal point is going to receive the invoice on the portal as well as trigger, make the payment. The accounts confirms that the payment has been received, and then again the project would be then decided to move ahead with the issuance request. Only thing is, if there's a 6.2 label included in this and it needs a confirmation for the host country, there is a step that the PSC, the PAC, will send the project to the host country for approval prior to the final issuance. So he will upload the invoice. You say, for example, we upload a dummy invoice. Yes, the invoice is uploaded by the accounts guy. The focal point receives a trigger that he has to make a payment. So because the initial view on the issuances is all that's there, right, of all the projects. So you can go there. Of the two, one is in progress, one is initial with PRC. So you can go there, upload the payment proof after he has made the payments. You can choose a file, which is the proof of the payment. You can say payment has been made. You can submit the payment. Again, it goes back to the accounts guy to confirmation with the bank that the payment has been realized so that the project, it can be processed further. Anything left? I don't know. Okay. The finance guy goes in for the issuance part. He receives a notification that this payment has been made. He can approve the payment. For approving the payment, he has to again have a look at all the labels which is given, the amount of credits which has been awarded, so that he can see the labels herein. He can see the amount of credit which is verified, and then he can then decide that whether the invoice was proper. He can see the comments made during the time of the payments. He can see it said, the focal point said, this is the payment that is made, and then he can decide on approving the payment or payment is not received. If he said payment is approved, then the project's payment has been realized. It moves forward for final confirmation of PAC. So the project approval committee has now received a confirmation from the accounts team that the project has now received the payment, and then they can decide what to do with it. So they can approve the issuance, or they can send it to the host country. If there is a 6.2 label and it requires, as per the host country letter of authorization and approval of the country at the final go to approve all issuances, they can send it to the host country. If they say no, if they can directly approve it, there is no such label involved, they can directly approve of the project. So they can see the project herein. They can submit it to the registry. This is the transaction registry. While submitting, he receives a confirmation of all that has to be given herein with all the issuance details, the technical details and everything. The claim, what was the claim, what was verified, what were the details, what is the creating period, what is the monitoring period, what are the labels which are given, which are awarded, what is the technical detail. So this is what goes directly to a transaction registry, and the project would get issued from the transaction registry the credits, and this would then land up on the issuance page under positive issuances. So any questions that you might have? So this is the project. It shows up EL claimed, SL claimed, SDG claimed, claim market regulations, claimed SDG goals, credits, and all. So I'll stop here. So yes, please.
Shivindu, I think for this, I think there is one question from Anna. So she has, I think she seems to be from a verifier, possibly.
Okay. Could
So
you
she
please
said,
demonstrate the process of interaction between GCC reviewer and VVB in case of findings at the stage of review, if got via download or upload of the document service with comments? Is this protocol public to? Is that any target deadline forcing to settle the raised issues for VPPs? How many loops are allowed? You've mentioned also view performance have been monitored. How? Good. So there are 3-4 parts of the question. Number one, so all our interactions between the GCC officer and the verifier in the form of findings are raised as a clarification note on the system, right? So the moment we send a clarification note after double confirmation, the verifier receives the issues or the validator receives the issues. They then decide upon the issues, how to address the issues. You do a back and forth with your client, the focal points and the project owners, and conclude and again send this back. Does it have a timeline? Yes. For all the iterations that we have, DA1, DA2, DA3, RFR, there are timelines in which you have got to respond. DA1, 60 days. DA2, 45 days. DA3, 30 days. RFR, 15 days. Because the number of issues should have progressively gone down and all the minor issues would have gone up and only the major issues would have remained with you, if at all, to address. So the timeline keeps shrinking over the period of time. So all these are, has a definite timeline. Does GCC have a timeline? Yes. For DA1, we have a timeline. For DA2, we have a timeline, and that too keeps decreasing over the period of time because we also have to look at lower amount of issues to resolve for resolutions. So yes, there are definitive timelines. How many loops? 3 loops for DA1, DA2, DA3, and 1 RFR. So 4. RFR is the final conclusion where you say yes or a no. There's no back and forth that happens between entities. And finally, you said how the monitoring, the verifier performance is getting monitored. So the verifier performance has a separate matrix called a verifier's performance matrix, which we have put as a part of the verifier management. If you look at the, I don't know whether you can see my screen, right? So now the team has come out with a verifier performance monitoring measurement tool. So these are the different aspects on which the validation and the verifications are checked. And this is done by the officer. So when the officer does a DA1, they fill up this form of saying, Whether bundling or debundling is something which is applicable in this case, there might be a no. So you can just put no herein. So it will go out. It will not go. The score would change. If there is a cross-checking of double counting, yes. And they can input or what is the input. So that's specific guidance from the team as to what should be the input between a total scale of 10. He may say that the job was done was 8, how to rank 8 and all that's therein. So depending upon the scores that they give in each of these sections, there is a final rating that comes, and that gives this stratification as to if the final score is between 0 to 2, that means there's a significant issues. If there are 2 to 4, there have been non-identification of main failure to identify main issues. 4 to 6 means technically. So there are these different stratifications. So each project gets classified with respect to scores, and the 10 recent scores then give you a final output of how the verifier is performing, and the system would trigger an alarm to the verifier if your performance keeps going down over the period of time, or it's not bettering over the period of time, or even if you're doing good, system gives you these updates. So this verification module runs in the background. The officer gives an input for each project during DA1 on how the performance has been by the validator and the verifier. And these are this matrix on which they enter the data, and that gives the final score of that job. Is it okay?
So one more thing, I think, she has also said, where are the protocols, where to look at, So I think whatever all has been said by Shubindu or what has been responded in each of the questions that you have asked, we have referred to the documents, and you can see also in the responses. I think all of them come from the protocols, or you can say from the requirement documents or the documents or standards that are publicly available on website for the GCC 2.0. So in general, if there are questions, queries with regard to project, how to submit project, what to do in the project, what are the requirements in the project, refer to project standard primarily. On all aspects of, registration, issuance, or maybe post-session change or renewal of printing period, or any other, what kinds of PRCs are available under the issuance track, or what are available in the prior approval track, what can be done. So you can refer to that. If you want to know about the timelines, about the process, who does what, how much time do verifiers have, how much time do project owners have, go and refer to program process. If you want to know what documents have you submitted, go and refer to program process, And similarly, anything related to verifier, how to conduct a verification, what to expect, whether or not verifier can do PRC or not, or can do renewal printing period. Is it a validator? Is a previous verifier? So you have to refer to the validation verification standard. So I think there are general rules. These are the general rules how it has to be. But if you want to know at the higher level about the GCC standard, about the GCC rules, requirements, and framework and everything, go and refer to GCC program framework. For anyone who has to start, go and refer to GCC program framework. That will give you an overall picture. That will make you, capable enough, or give you all the tools for you to, give you a basic understanding of the GCC. Then you can, serve through all other requirements.
Right.
So any questions? We still have 12 minutes. For any questions that you may have, of course, we have tried to respond to almost all the questions that you have raised in the chat box or in the Q&A box.
If there's anything that's left out and you'd like to raise, you can raise your hand and we can give you an opportunity to speak up and directly address the questions.
So there will also be FAQs that will be uploaded, I think, in a couple of days, perhaps tomorrow, hopefully today after tomorrow. We'll also try to reflect the latest questions that have also been raised in this one, to combine everything together. So it'll be available on GCC website. So you can see the GCC website, the frequently asked questions, FAQs. You will be able to see all of them there. So any questions, please type it in the chat box, or maybe you can take the floor and you can ask directly the questions that you may have. Okay, let me, in the meantime, you're thinking about questions. Let me take a little bit of time here. So for the projects portal that you would have seen, for those who have used UNFCCC portal or UNFCCC website, or you would have seen, the registration issuance, the PRC, or the renewal crediting period, the post prior consideration form. They are all they're not integrated. PRC, you have to go and look at separate link and try to find out which PRC for a project has been approved or not. It will not be linked with the entire project cycle that you can see here. So renewal crediting period is a different website or sub website, micro website, or even for TOAs, or for example. So here what we have tried to do is we have tried to integrate everything together. So if any project owner or verifier wants to know anything about the projects that have been submitted, I think this is a one place, single window kind of an approach that you have. You can take it, you can go anywhere, on a beach or anywhere, wherever you have internet connection. You should be able to work on this, and you should be able to get all the information. You will get the status of each and every project, at what stage the project is. You will, I think there will be minimum need of sending an email to getting a status from the GCC operations team. You can find a lot of information yourself, status yourself, and that should, I would say, make this process a little more efficient. That should reduce your, I can understand. I mean, people want to know what's happening to your project, and it causes a lot of frustration, at times, because there are deadlines, there are buyers running after you, there are verifiers running after your lives. And so we have tried to integrate everything in this whole process, connected all the stakeholders together, and I think this can make your life easier, I guess. So
just one thing, one thing I
yeah.
wanted to add that so we have two set of users who are sitting here in, right? One set of users are the focal point and the project owners. One set of users are the verifiers. For the focal point and the project owners, when you go onto the portal, when you come onto the portal, you would need to create your ID, right? So that you can submit a project. For the verifiers, when we enter into a contract with a verifier, we know the guys who are going to log in, who is going to operate on the platform. You don't need to create an account. We automatically create an account and intimate you, and then you can just log in, change your password, and start using the portal in itself. Okay, so there's no requirement of a verifier to create an account on the portal and request access to the portal. We provide as GCC to you because there's a separate verifier management part that's happening with you. For the focal point and the project owners, they need to create an account. Obviously, the focal point and the project owners who are already there with us as a part of GCC 1.0, you already have your login in the old portal. Your logins would only get migrated to the new one. You would just be getting a mail saying that your ID has been transferred to the new portal, log in to change the password, and that point on, you can start accessing the projects. If you are submitting a new project, you'll obviously start from the prior consideration form and submit a new project.
Yeah, okay. Any questions? Any views? If not question, any views? Or yeah, Anand, yeah, I think you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Sorry for the interruption. Sir, I have one small request. That is it possible that we can have some, because since this is quite a new system compared to the old system, and come out with a lot of beautiful functionalities integrated into it. Is there an option that we have an option to have this kind of walkthrough and technical documentation, and is there an option that we can use this test site to have it trained for the verifiers, so that it will be easy for us also to learn both the portals of when we know how to use the portal, so we will be sure about what is happening the other side, what the PP is doing, whether the PP is doing any mistake or something like that, or even we will know how to submit the documentation in an appropriate way without having committing the mistakes. And because as the VVB grows and when the manpower keeps changing, so training the new manpower also becomes challenging, within the organization. So, all these things put together, I think.
Right. Good. Yeah. So, responding to your question, yes, there would be several help functions which would be there. Number one is we are creating a manual for the portal as to how you can navigate through each of the steps and the options therein. There would be a separate manual for the verifier validators, the VVBs, a separate manual for the project owners focal points, a separate manual for the steering committee members, because each of them would have different parts to play, right, in this whole portal. So there would be separate manuals where there would be snapshots of the portal with 1, 2, 3. So you've got to click 1, then go to 2 and do 3. That will be there. The videos that we are doing, this webinars that we are conducting, these videos would be made available. So you can go through them and understand. We will also have very specific videos for each of the steps. For example, letter of authorization submission, prior consideration form submission, submission of project, submission of PMR, submission of a post-registration change. So there will be very short videos for each of these instances as well, so that you know where to start and how it ends, where it ends. So we will have all these. Apart from that, there will also be a help module that will get integrated into the portal where you could raise tickets with respect to help or any kind of findings that you have or any improvement that you want to suggest on the portal, which we will take care of. We could collate and our backend team will work on it and give you the response. So there will be these several ways that we can help you in understanding, because this is new. You need to do a little of going through before you are accustomed with what comes after and where to get what kind of an information.
Yeah, and also for especially for verifiers, we have also verifier web conference every two months where verifiers can raise issues, and there would be confidential minutes that would be or report that will be shared for them. We have been doing it for since last, I think, mid of last year, and I think yes, I think it will be between the GCC team and all the verifiers for the members to resolve it. But I think there are other possibilities, as Shubhendu said. You can write an email. You can also ask for a video call or something like this, and we will try to respond in a positive way. I know first couple of months might be little kind of I would say sometimes overwhelming, sometimes frustrating. But I think I just wanted to let you know that the whole GCC team is here to support you and to handhold, in the best possible way we can. I think. But before I leave, unless you have more questions, so yesterday we also received, information from ICBCM. So they have done. We submitted an application in October, and they have given a positive response to our application. And I think in a couple of days you'll find our application listed and listed in the ICBCM website. So. Yeah, I think this is it. We'll have another webinar on transition plan, particularly focusing on what will happen if I have to move from GCC 2.0 from 1.0 to 2.0. How do I do that? And what are the timelines? What happened to the older projects? What happened to the new projects? So there will be a transition plan for registration projects. There will be a transition plan for issued projects. There is no need for transition on renewal operating period or for PRC, because that has not been yet started, and we don't have any PRCs that are submitted as of now. So these two documents should give you good understanding of what to do and how to do, and we will also have a session. So we'll announce it soon, hopefully in the last week of this month. And then also we will also be uploading the fee schedule for the GCC 2.0. So, and you have PSF ready. Validation report is also made publicly available. PSF forms and everything is there. PSF validation report is also there. So I think there is, there is enough tools and templates that are available to you with guidance, where you can start the process, and you can actually make submissions to the GCC program from 1st of Feb this year. I think that should actually allow you to participate in this process. So with this, perhaps if there are no questions, I don't see any hands or I don't see anything. So I would like to thank all of you and wish you a very great evening. For some of you who have evenings, and there may be people who may be from places where it's, it's still the morning. So so good luck to you, all of you, and thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you
Shivendu,
so much.
for the patience over the last couple of since last week. No? So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you all for your participation. Bye bye, and take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.